1612. The witch trial that killed an entire family. Pendle Hill, Lancashire, August 20th, 1612. The year is 1612. England is a country running on fear. A king sits on the throne who has written an entire book about why witches must be destroyed. A country still raw from religious war, still haunted by the memory of the gunpowder plot just 7 years before. A county, Lancashire, that London views as wild, lawless, and not entirely trustworthy. And in a small village at the foot of Pendle Hill, a 17-year-old girl is about to ask a peddler for something that will get 10 people killed. The world they lived in. To understand what happened in Pendle in 1612, you have to understand the world that made it possible. Lancashire, in the north of England, was not like the rest of the country. The roads were terrible. Communication with London was slow. People lived in scattered hamlets across infertile, fog-covered hillsides. And unlike most of England, many people here had never really stopped being Catholic, even though the law demanded otherwise. This made Lancashire dangerous. King James I despised Catholics. He had survived the gunpowder plot. He had written a book, Demonology, ordering his people to hunt down and execute practitioners of witchcraft. And in his mind, Catholics and witches were part of the same dark network threatening his Protestant kingdom. Into this already anxious world, consider two families, both desperately poor, both based in the forest around Pendle Hill, and both with reputations that would, in 1612, get them killed. The first family is led by a woman known as Old Demdike, real name Elizabeth Southerns. She is roughly 80 years old, blind, bedridden for much of the year, and for the past 50 years she has been known across the region as a cunning woman, a village healer who used charms, herbs, and folk magic to treat illness, divine the future, and cast minor curses for those who paid her. This was not unusual. In 17th century England, cunning women were part of village life. If your cow got sick, if your child had a fever, if you needed to know who stole from you, you went to the cunning woman. She was a fixture, a service, something the village quietly depended on. The second family is led by Old Chaddocks, Anne Whittle. Same age, same poverty, same profession, and deeply, bitterly hostile to the Devices. In 1601, 11 years before all of this, a member of the Chaddocks family broke into the Device home, Malkin Tower, and stole goods worth roughly £200 in today's money. A small theft by any modern measure, but in that world, at that level of poverty, an unforgivable one. The two families had been enemies ever since. That grudge, that old festering wound between two poor families scratching a living from the same cold hillside would eventually send 10 people to the gallows. The pins, the peddler, the curse. March 21st, 1612. Jennet Device, Old Demdike's teenage granddaughter, is walking along a road near the village of Colne, heading toward Trodden Forest. She encounters a man named John Law, a peddler from Halifax, carrying a large pack of goods for sale. Alison asks him for some metal pins. This sounds trivial. It isn't. Metal pins in the 17th century were handmade and expensive, and they had a specific association with folk magic, used in healing rituals, divination, love spells. A cunning woman's granddaughter asking a peddler for pins was not an innocent request. John Law likely knew exactly what they were for. He refused. The accounts differ on what happened next. Some say Alison cursed him under her breath. Some say she simply walked away angry. Either way, within minutes of their encounter, John Law collapsed on the road. His face contorted. His body went rigid down one side. He could barely speak. Today, we would call what happened to John Law a stroke. In 1612, they called it witchcraft. Jennet Device was summoned before the local justice of the peace, Roger Noel, and here is where the story takes its first truly strange turn. Alison confessed immediately. Not because she was tortured, not because she was threatened. She confessed because she genuinely believed she had done it. She had grown up in a household where magic was real, where curses worked, where her grandmother had been casting spells for 50 years. When John Law fell down, she didn't think, "This is a coincidence." She thought, "I did that." She told Noel everything. She had made a pact with the devil. She had asked him to lame John Law, and she accused her brother James of witchcraft too. And then, perhaps seeing an opportunity, perhaps genuinely believing it, she accused the Chattox family of murdering her own father through witchcraft years ago. The machine had started, and once it started, it would not stop. Malkin Tower, the Sabbath, the Gathering. March 21st, 1612. More people were dragged before Roger Noel. Old Demdike, herself blind, 80 years old, barely able to stand, was brought in for questioning. She confessed too. Said she had made a pact with the devil 20 years before, in the shape of a boy in a coat who appeared to her near a stone pit. Said she had a mark on her body where he had fed from her. Old Chattox was brought in. She confessed too. Said she had made her own pact. Said she used clay figures, crude puppets to curse people. Said her daughter Anne Redfern had helped her make them. By now, Noel had 4 people in custody. He was satisfied. He sent them to Lancaster Gaol to await trial at the August Assizes. Case closed, as far as he was concerned. But then, Good Friday, April 12th, word reached Noel that a gathering had taken place at Malkin Tower, the Device family home. 20 people, maybe more. A meal was eaten. A meeting was held. Historians now believe it was almost certainly a Catholic prayer meeting, or simply neighbors gathered to support a family whose grandmother, mother, and sister had just been arrested. People in crisis, people afraid. But into this already anxious world considered 2 families, both desperately poor, both based in the forest around Pendle Hill, and both with reputations that would, in 1612, get them killed. August 18th and 19th, Lancaster Assizes. The trial of the Pendle witches begins. Old Demdike never made it to the courtroom. The dungeon beneath Lancaster Castle, dark, damp, and freezing, had been too much for a blind 80-year-old woman. She died in prison before the trial even began. The others were not so lucky. 10 people stood trial. The evidence against most of them was extraordinarily thin. Hearsay, old grudges, confessions made by people who genuinely believed they were guilty of things they hadn't done. The accused were denied the right to call witnesses in their own defense. No lawyers, no appeals. In a witch trial, the normal rules did not apply. And then the judges called their key witness, Jennet Device, 9 years old. She was too small to see over the bar of the witness stand, so they brought a table, and Jennet Device climbed onto it, faced the court, and began to speak. In normal English law, a child of 9 could not give testimony. They were considered too young to understand the meaning of an oath. But in witch trials, things were different. King James laws allowed the standard rules of evidence to be suspended when witchcraft was involved. A child's word could end a life. Jennet Device gave testimony against the people who attended the Malkin Tower gathering. She named them one by one. She described what she had seen. And then she testified against her own mother. Elizabeth Device, Alison's mother, Jennet's mother, was standing in the dock when her youngest child stood up and described calmly and clearly her mother's involvement in witchcraft, the murders she had supposedly committed, the meetings she had attended, the pacts that had been made. Elizabeth Device began to scream. The courtroom erupted. Elizabeth screamed and called out to her child, begging her, cursing her, and the judges ordered Elizabeth removed from the courtroom entirely. She was dragged out while Jennet continued to speak. James Device, her older brother, also tried to interrupt. He too was removed, and Jennet kept talking. Think about that image for a moment. A 9-year-old child standing on a table in a packed courtroom, continuing to speak in a steady voice while her mother is dragged behind her screaming. We do not know what Jennet Device was thinking. We do not know if she understood what her words were doing. We do not know if she was coached, manipulated, pressured, or if she genuinely, sincerely believed every word she said. Children in 1612 grew up in a world where witchcraft was as real as the seasons. She had been raised in a household full of it. Whatever the truth, Jennet Device's testimony helped convict her mother, her brother, her sister Alison, and 6 others. Her evidence was largely uncorroborated by anything else, but it was enough. In 1612, in a witch trial, the word of a 9-year-old child could send people to their deaths. August 20th, 1612. 10 people were taken to Gallows Hill above Lancaster and hanged. Elizabeth, Alison, James, Alice, Anne, Catherine, Jane, John, Margaret, and Jennet. 10 people in one day for witchcraft. This single trial accounted for roughly 2% of all witchcraft executions in the whole of England across 300 years of witch trials. 10 people from 2 related investigations tried and hanged in 2 days. It was unprecedented in English legal history. The trial proceedings were immediately published, by order of the judges themselves, in a book called The Wonderful Discovery of Witches in the County of Lancaster. It became one of the most widely read accounts of any witch trial in English history. It shaped how subsequent trials were run. And the testimony of a 9-year-old child, the precedent that a child's word could override normal rules of evidence and convict adults of capital offenses, became part of that template. 80 years later, Salem, Massachusetts, 1692. Young girls as primary witnesses, children's testimony driving convictions, 200 accused, 19 hanged. Historians trace a direct line from the courtroom at Lancaster in 1612 to the gallows at Salem in 1692. And now, the twist that almost no one tells you about. In 1634, 22 years after the Pendle trials, a woman named Jennet Device was arrested in Lancaster. She was accused of witchcraft. The key witness against her was a 10-year-old boy. Whether this is definitively the same Jennet Device who testified against her family at 9 years old, historians cannot confirm with absolute certainty. But the name, the location, the timing, there are very few historians who doubt it was her. She was found guilty. She was not executed. The boy witness eventually admitted he had fabricated his testimony, and her case was referred to King Charles himself, who was already suspicious of the wave of witch accusations sweeping the north. She was reprieved, but she was imprisoned at Lancaster Castle, the same dungeon where her grandmother had died, where her mother had screamed her name. Whether Jennet Device survived that imprisonment or died there as old Demdike had died before her, we do not know. The records go silent. The woman whose words had killed her family, condemned by the very system she had served, by the very precedent that her own child testimony had helped create. History does not call this justice. History doesn't know what to call it, but it is something. In 1998, supporters petitioned the British government for an official pardon for the 10 people executed at Pendle. The government refused. Their convictions legally spanned to this day. Malkin Tower, the Device family home where that Good Friday gathering took place, was demolished immediately after the executions. Authorities feared it would become a place of pilgrimage. Today, no physical trace of it remains. Historians believe the ruins lie somewhere near the village of Blacko, buried beneath centuries of farmland. A statue of Alice Nutter stands in her home village of Roughly, the woman who died rather than speak, the woman whose real secret we will probably never recover. What happened in Pendle in 1612 was not really about witchcraft. It was about poverty and fear and old grudges between 2 desperate families scratching a living from an inhospitable hillside. It was about a king who was frightened of anything he couldn't control, and a legal system designed to make sure the frightened king always won. It was about a 9-year-old child who may have genuinely believed she was doing the right thing, or who may have been used by people who absolutely knew better. It was about what happens when panic becomes law, when accusation becomes proof, when the voice of a child outweighs the screams of an innocent mother. The people of Pendle Hill live with this story still. On August 20th of every year, it has been more than 400 years since 10 people climbed a hill above Lancaster and were hanged. For asking for pins, for holding a meeting, for being poor and old and in the wrong place at the wrong time, for being the wrong kind of person in the wrong kind of England. Their names were Elizabeth, Alazan, James, Alice, Anne, Catherine, Jane, John, Margaret, and Jennet. Remember them.